Hello everyone, I'm here in the Panzermuseum Munster through an invitation from Militaries You Visualize and the museum itself. And I'm proudly to present you some content here from this museum. And I'm standing here in front of the Tiger II, and I had a question, how is it about scuttling a vehicle? Because we saw currently in the conflict in Ukraine that a lot of vehicles get abandoned, standing around, getting captured and so on. How was the situation in World War II about armored vehicles in this case?
So basically the Germans had particularly charges to destroy vehicles. They were sometimes for the Tiger, they were later introduced, but they had it for all types of gun barrels basically. And another way was of course always you could let out of the recoil mechanism, let out the oil and the fluid, then you set a specific setting and then you fired the gun. So basically it recoiled into max position and ripped out several parts of it. There are also sometimes you can, I think firing pin removing was not the case here. I mean earlier times for Napoleonic times I've read something that they buried some parts of the guns if they could go back or something. So there was always like, we totally destroy it or there's some minor damage you do. And probably one of the most curious cases I came across, or basically Magnus Pahl, who did his work on the Fallschirmjäger, came across that at one point the Fallschirmjäger were about to be overrun and they destroyed a typewriter. And it was like it was for the German soldier, it was like a question of honor to not let their weapons get into the hands of the enemy. And for me, particularly the typewriter situation, because it's in a way, it was kind of funny, but also understandable for me. So I'm a bit on both sides. And then for me, it was when I saw in Ukraine that the Ukrainians captured Russian T-80 Command tanks. And this was like this stark contrast. So these guys destroy a typewriter and these guys don't destroy a command tank. Of course, it could be the situation like they were thinking, okay, we give it up and we get it back later because we are winning or something, or some other situation because the tactical situation is different. But it could also be how everything is approached with the material and everything else. I mean, this is two different types of times and also cultures, I would say.
I mean, in the historical things, like you said, in Napoleonic areas, I always read the story that someone put nails into the firing hole of cannons to scuttle them. But from my time in the German army, I read a lot of regulations about tanks, and I'm privately collecting regulations all around the world, American ones, Soviet ones, and I'm comparing them always a bit and talking to other tankers, and I read various ways of scuttling a vehicle, from temporarily providing it that the enemy can't use it, from immobilizing it, but to the most extreme stuff that you completely destroy the tank, that you blow it up, that you start a fire in it. And it depends on the tactical situation, I would say, if you can think of get it back or if not. I mean, the most extreme thing would be to destroy it with your own air force, but on the smaller scale, that's not up to you, it's up to the crew itself. So I read a lot that you can like remove certain parts of the fire control system so the enemy can't actually use the tank to shoot, but maybe to drive. From the Eastern stuff, I read stories about like removing the engine oil and keeping the engine running until the engine gets damaged so it can't move away at this option. Or from putting a hand grenade to the elevation mechanism of the tank to damage it so the tank can't get moved. With the thing with Ukraine, what I think is, if you compare the two certain things, when you're in the offensive, you maybe think that you can maybe get the vehicle back. And even if you think about like removing certain parts of the tank, like from the fire control system, both sides are actually using Soviet tanks. So maybe even if you remove a part, the enemy has it probably as well to replace it. So that's the point. But it's also, I think, a big propaganda thing to see that like tanks like T-90M, the most modern Russian main battle tank, gets captured and now used by the Ukrainians against own forces of the Russians. And I mean, that wasn't that case on the large scale in the Second World War. I think that captured tanks was used by the Allies.
In a way, it's interesting because the Soviets had a complete manual on the Panther tank. And we don't know if this is a unicorn thing, in the sense that it's completely out of the ordinary, because they didn't really use that many Panthers. For instance, they converted the Panzer III to a self-propelled gun in a way. I think they captured around, Stalingrad about 50 to 100 or something. So there you saw, I wouldn't say large-scale use, because not that many, but enough that they converted them. But for the Panther, because I talked with Peter Samsonov and he mentioned it's kind of odd, and he knows the Russian files or the Soviet files very well, because they didn't use it that much. And so the question is, and I also talked with Jens Wehner about it, and he also said, yeah, it's also a rather complicated tank, the Panther. So it could be everything between, okay, they planned to use many of them, or they suspected it, or maybe it was, okay, we really researched this tank, and as a byproduct we make this, or some unit commander called for it, or maybe Stalin, you don't know. It could be various cases. We know it exists, but why it exists, we don't know yet. Or at least, yeah, we don't know. Maybe the Russians know.
I mean, I saw also some different ways of scuttling that was actually used. For example, this video of the T-90 that gets destroyed by another T-90. That's something even in NATO doctrines is written, that when you can't blow it up the tank with a hand grenade, for example, or it's too dangerous, that you can shoot it actually with another tank to prevent it falling in the hands. Because inside the tank you have also stuff like the radios. Maybe you don't think directly about the radios, that maybe the enemy won't do anything with the tank itself, but they have the radio, maybe the frequencies are still dialed in, or with modern radios, the
encryption, yeah.
That they get the description, or with the command tanks, maybe plans, informations about the strength and stuff on papers. But also personal things. We see a lot of stuff that's going on, that like soldiers getting calls from the other side, like this propaganda war on another level that's going on. And that's more about also not destroying only the weapon, but also like the systems inside to prevent them from getting into enemy hands.
There's one also very important point we need to point out, specifically about a Second World War, and they have a parallel now in Ukraine. So there's a difference between using a captured vehicle and then, I would say, employing it. So using would be, okay, you capture a tank, you use it, and then it gets damaged or something, and you leave it next to the road. Whereas where employing, I would see you use it in a tactical sense and with doctrine and with more thought behind it, and also a logistical strain. And so you have to keep this kind of in mind, that, like, for instance, the Germans have specific companies where they use T-34s. They were rather limited, and this would I call employing. And you also have many pictures like the Germans used Soviet tanks in the Second World War, but you look at the pictures and there generally you see one or two tanks. So this wouldn't be called employing. I would say it was using, and then at one point you had to use, you basically destroy the vehicle or it falls into enemy hands. So this is something you keep in mind. And now with social media you see this immediately, and you see, oh, they have a T-90 this or something. But there's the question, is it just basically more a trophy tank, or is it really employed properly?
I mean, I have also a point where I maybe want to ask you about. I read the stories about like that parts in the earlier war, in the Second World War, that Germans tend to print the company that produced certain parts onto the parts, like with even the address. For example, in this city, this road, and this address is this part built by the company because the company advertised with it. The Allies captured it, and they read basically address where this part gets factoried, and they knew where to bomb it basically. And the other thing I read, where I don't know if it's true, that there were like also numbers, like producing numbers, that the Allies could figure out with mathematics how many vehicles are existing at this point, because they found numbers of it inside vehicles. And what was that case?
So about the first one, I didn't hear this so far, but the issue is the German industry was very different. It was not really centralized. So for instance, there was the major problem with just trucks. So before the war, they wanted to standardize them. There was a special, I think, a shell program or something. I forgot the name, and it in the description basically. And to standardize on several vehicles, because you had many small or medium-sized companies that produced trucks, but they produced them all different kinds of trucks. So you couldn't exchange the parts or anything else. So in this case, it could make sense that the information was provided there, and also on the plaques and something else. And then for the other one with the serial numbers, and you have to print it on every part generally. So the Germans used, for once, they used production codes, which I think were 2 to 3 letters. It was like CK for something and this and that. And you could figure them out like 100 different companies, and you have codes now where it is. And for the numbers, as far as I know, they use statistical methods, because these numbers were also not necessarily incremental, or they had like a large number before them, but you still with mathematical methods you can find out, okay, that amount of Panthers or that amount of Tigers were likely produced from the destroyed vehicles they got, because yeah, that's statistics, and how you can do this, there are methods for that. So that is certainly a right as well. The first one I suspect makes sense, because I mean the oddest thing I ever found in the files was something about there was, I think it was a tank division or a tank unit, a smaller tank unit, and it was a bill for fuel, and it was during the war. And it was so odd, and I sent it to several other historians and asked, did you ever see something like this? And everyone responded, no. And we also don't really have an idea. It was like a fuel bill that was sent, I think, from the Eastern Front to Berlin to a private company. And I was like, and I looked at it for 15 minutes and I was just, what is this? And I sent it to the others, and everyone else was like, yeah, we never heard of this, or we never saw a similar document. We have no idea either.
I mean, if a certain document like this will get into enemy hand, the enemy knows where to drop the bombs, let's say it this way.
I mean, the most production facilities and everything else was known, and this was mainly, I think it was like a gas station on this side. This was the funny thing. I was like, okay, this unit, and I know specifically from, there was something, yeah, there was something about security. They complained that soldiers gave their unit ID sometimes when they bought something in shops in Germany, and even in Germany or in France, they discouraged this and said, don't give away your unit number or something else. This is all information you need to be classified. And there were similar issues for the Allies, where they at one point, I think they removed of the list of the killed in action, that they removed the unit IDs, so that the Axis could not figure out which units were stationed where, or mostly so. But I know basically from the maps that usually both sides kind of knew which divisions were located where. I mean, the major difference was before D-Day, there was a complete basically shadow army or a virtual army that the Germans assumed was in England that might come over. This was one where they got it wrong. But for the most other parts, they knew once they faced the unit, which units they faced. So for the major production plants, they generally knew where they were. So, and also especially fuel production.
So you can say basically, even if you scuttle the vehicle in that case, that it's immobilized or the gun is destroyed, that the enemy can't use the vehicle itself, he still can get a lot of information out of it if it's otherwise intact. So I would suggest that the best way often is just to completely destroy it. I would say, like, blow it up, set it ablaze, like with the fuel, or hit it with a different tank to make sure that the enemy doesn't get information even from the smallest part. If radios or even documents, papers, I mean, often you're in a hurry, I assume, when you're leaving a vehicle. Maybe you forgot something like a paper that was under your seat or so, that gives you maybe the enemy certain information.
Also, a soldier doesn't think that on a big scale, I think, generally. I mean, do you think about the statistical methods that they get out of the serial number? That's like high nerdy.
I mean, it's officially said that if you leave the tank, that you have to take with you all machine guns.
Yeah.
And if you
the machine guns also for self-defense sometimes.
Yeah, but you have to know that the crew itself has also self-defense weapons. For example, with modern tanks, you have submachine guns and pistols, and then additionally you're tasked to take the machine guns. And I think often the soldiers will say, yeah, I don't want to carry a machine gun, I want to get away from it now. So you will just let it in. So the question is how the regulation will get used actually in scuttling, and how the soldiers are doing it. Maybe that's one of the cases in Ukraine, that the soldiers are just saying, I want to get out here now before something happening. And that's maybe the reason they don't scuttle it.
I mean, it's also a question of morale. I think there was 1 or 2 cases in the Battle of Britain where I think German bomber was shot down, and the crews, they crash land and continued to fight with the machine guns. These are the very extreme examples. And I think the other extreme example is probably you give up a command tank and don't do anything. You just get out of it and head for the trees.
This with the command tank is on this scale a thing, because it's one time a propaganda success for Ukraine. Then it reduces the morale of your own forces if you see that your commanding units and commanding vehicles are abandoning their vehicles and they get into an enemy hand. And on another scale, this vehicle is now used against you, so you have to fight against your own vehicles that were on your side previously. So I would say scuttling is a very important thing. It should be more in the heads of the people, and that the most easy way is, I think, to destroy it. For example, a tank with another tank. If you have one Tiger II, let's say, that breaks down, that another Tiger II will shoot it until it blows up, to make sure and then get away. I thank you for answering my question and giving me some insights about World War II, because I'm more focused on Cold War. And I'm thanking the Panzermuseum Münster for the invitation here. And it's a lovely place. They are celebrating 40th anniversary this year, I think. And if you want to come here, it's a very nice place, very rare vehicles that you can look here. And see you in my next video.
See you.
See you.